So George Groves has come out. He's talking about Eubank Jr. versus Conor Benn. They want to get the payday. They want to reignite their father's rivalry. Get that Eubank versus Benn family. Well, don't want to call it reunion, but call it clash kicking off again. And the way it's going is that obviously there's nostalgia from the boxing community, especially those that were obviously watching boxing at that time. The Ben versus Eubank. They want to get that payday. They want to rinse that avenue before it's too late, especially with Eubank Jr. possibly maybe looking on to do other things, and then obviously Conor Benn looking to do other things. So they pretty much want to rinse it now. You know, while things are still hot. So what do you guys think? Obviously, George Groves is talking about it's a mismatch. This is a fight that he believes probably shouldn't be happening, for various different reasons and for reasons that I can kind of understand. George Groves obviously, Conor Benn is obviously is a welterweight, competing at 147 pounds, and Eubank Jr. does rotate between middleweight and super middleweight, so obviously 160 up to 168. So obviously this fight, if it is to happen, it will be at a catch weight because no way in hell is Conor Benn moving up to Eubank Jr.'s territory to fight him, especially when he's not really been fighting guys professionally. Don't know about sparring, but professionally in those weight classes, and obviously putting on those amount of pounds on the body. He hasn't, like I said, competed at professionally in a real fight. And things in those sense, because those 168 guys, I ain't no welterweight. Those are some big guys over there. So 154 is what they've been talking about. 154 is what they're talking about, the weight class being catch weight for Conor Benn versus Eubank Jr. And is this a mismatch? Is it something that doesn't need to happen? Because and obviously Eubank Senior, obviously the weight class is not like a welterweight versus super mid. Their weight class was the same, so around the same weight class. And obviously these two totally different. Conor Benn a lot smaller than Eubank Jr. I know Conor Benn has talked about wanting to. He will fight him at 160. Listen, by the time they've sat down and talk about things, if they wanted to fight at 160, they'll be fighting at 160. If they're talking about 154, because that's what's been talked about behind the scenes, they want to fight at the 160. So 154, you want to fight at. So the question is, if they're talking about a mismatch, what are the factors that will make this a mismatch? If we're talking about weight class, obviously, I feel like Eubank Jr. is more disadvantaged in terms of making that weight than Conor Benn is. Obviously, Conor Benn at 154. I don't know what weight he walks about in, if he's not training or if he's just, pretty much just living life, eating the way he wants. What does he normally weigh in at? Is he 154 then already? And then he's just going to train on that, So I feel like it's easier for Conor Benn to move up from 147 to 154 than it is for Eubank to move down from, let's say, 168 down to 154, even if he's at 160 moving down to 154. I think it's going to be a lot harder for him, not because he can't do it necessarily, but because of how draining it's going to be for him. Eubank Jr. is already a chiseled guy. He's not like one of these fighters that you can literally see them and see where, that added weight loss is going to come from. Where is that weight loss going to come from? He's going to have to lose muscle mass. Probably he hasn't already got, that much bulk. He's not a heavyweight. You can say lose the muscle. Like he's not got that much. He's literally on the bare bones when it comes to his muscle. So is he going to have to cut down on the gym? And is that going to drain him in terms of his energy? And some fighters, when they do lose weight like that, does it, affect their punch resistance as well? Because obviously we haven't seen Conor Benn fighting bigger guys professionally, but in the fight, the people that he has fought, he does hit. He has got pop in his punches. So, does Eubank Jr. need to be depleting himself, to come down there to fight at a catch weight that he hasn't fought under the lights in before, and then come in there against someone who, arguably, if he catches Eubank, if Eubank Jr. hangs his chin out to dry and he gets caught clean, could be in trouble. So is that something that is worth Eubank Jr.'s while? What does Eubank Jr. gain from fighting Conor Benn, apart from obviously a good payday? Because both of these guys, they talk a bit, they got the they definitely, I like to see a round table when they get, the gloves are off settings, what that would look like. But what does Eubank Jr. have to gain from this fight? What does he have to gain from this fight? If he beats Conor Benn, they're gonna say, oh, Conor Benn, he wasn't ready, he's still coming up the welterweight division, whatever. you know, and then if he loses to Conor Benn, they're gonna say that he's losing to, you know, a British prospect that, you know, that is looking to go and do bigger, better things in the welterweight division. So, what does Eubank Jr. gain apart from, you know, obviously a payday? What does he? What does he get? Because if he should lose this fight, I guarantee you, you know, even just the media, social media, boxing community, they're gonna be definitely paying more attention to Conor Benn than Eubank Jr. And Eubank Jr. is already roughed up the feathers in terms of people expect him to fight much better fighters or be fighting more often. You know, he's been quite inactive. You know, he's relatively inactive, doesn't fight enough, and then you go there and you get, especially if it's a decisive and you go there and get knocked out by Conor Benn, it's not gonna look good, man. It's not going to look good. So what does Eubank Jr. benefit from fighting Conor Benn? What does he benefit? You know, if these two, if Conor Benn moves up the welterweight division, beats, you know, if he's fighting for world titles, he's beating a Cavernis for world title, he picks up the world title, he's fighting, you know, more established in the welterweight division, especially going out there and beating some of these, you know, the guys from the US, you know, and then maybe, you know, Eubank Jr. is fighting in his weight class, maybe fights Charlo, maybe he's been talking about he wants to fight Golovkin, maybe he's got through those two fights, you know, and then maybe you guys want to have the rubber match and fight each other. Okay, fair enough. That, but because I feel like that would be a much better position for Eubank Jr. At least you fought guys in your weight class, you know, top guys, and then obviously it'll be the build up will be even a lot better because you've seen Conor Benn maybe potentially beat guys in his weight class. You fought the top guys in your weight class as well, and people's like, right, let's get these two. They both is Eubank versus the Benn, get it going, and after you've both fought elite fighters in your weight class. But now in this position, when that's not taken place, and Conor Benn that's on the ascend and he's the one moving up, if he should beat Eubank Jr., it's just going to add even more to his hype. He adds more to his hype because if Conor Benn beating Eubank Jr. does more for his hype than Eubank beating Conor Benn for his hype. He's not going to get barely any hype. It's going to be like, oh, you beat a younger, you beat you know, Benn that's still going up the ranks. That's all that's going to do. So, you know what? Yeah, I can understand, you know, whether that's the point that George Groves is making, but it's going to be difficult for, you know, for Eubank to make. And it's going to be, how is that going to affect his performance going up? You know, for the profile for Eubank, you just barely do anything. Beat Conor Benn. So what? Why haven't you fought Golovkin? Why haven't you fought Charlo? What's all this? You know, no one's going to say that about Benn if he beats you. They're not going to say, oh, why haven't you fought Virgil Ortiz? Because people still have the perception that he's on the ascent. They've seen Eubank Jr. His name has been here for a while now, and he ain't fought no Golovkin. He ain't fought no one that we want to see. That right, it's a big night for Eubank Jr. I haven't had anything like that. He's two on a different stage in their career. You know, Conor Benn's literally still in his 20s. So we have to wait and see what happens. Drop your comments in the comment section below. What do you guys think about Eubank Jr. potentially fighting Conor Benn? Is it a mismatch? Is it a match? Perfect? Maybe you guys think it's a perfect fight. Let me see what you guys are saying in the comment section below. Be sure to like the video, share the video, and spray all that good stuff across the channel. Cheers.